call out everybody, but I will say one thing. Jay has a new title now. He's now CIO at Highbar Brands. So congratulations to him on that. And the rest of us are here, and I don't think I need to say anything else. So what's new in Microsoft world? Okay, so there is a ton of stuff going on. I'm going to start off with
real quick. Yeah, sorry, just because I have to. I did turn on recording and transcription, so just so everybody knows that that's on now. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so don't say anything you shouldn't. All right. First, I'm going to cover some things in Power BI, and I'm going to kind of go through this new things that were in preview that are now GA, generally available. First thing is that's GA is the embedding for embedded reports. Like you take a Power BI report and you embed it into SharePoint. Copilot can now talk to that embedded report, and you can actually ask it questions about the report data inside the SharePoint page. So that's kind of a cool thing. That's generally available now. The big TMDL stuff that some of which I demoed in July, a lot of the code view and all that kind of stuff in Power BI, that is all generally available now as well. So it's all officially baked in to the product. Copilot measure descriptions, that's generally available now. That basically allows you to have let Copilot kind of figure out what your formulas or your measures are doing, and then put an English description in the description there for people to be able to see and view in English what the thing does. The Databricks catalog integration is now generally available and baked in, and so now it shows up right with the OneLake, right in the OneLake Data Hub. If you're mirroring a Databricks data set and things like that in there, then that's all in there in part, built into the product now. And then there's a few some of the visualizations that were previously in preview are now generally available and have been kind of finalized. The zoom charts or the drill down, the Power Visit dates, and some of those are all available in App Source. If people are interested in checking those out, you should see those, and they're generally available now as well. New features. So a couple of new preview items have come up. First one, this one's kind of cool. I have not tried this out yet, so if anybody has, let me know. But basically, there's an ability now with Copilot in your report. If you ask Copilot a question about your report, it used to kind of like only be able to see what was visible on your screen. So if you had filters and you were looking at a certain date range, whatever you had there in that data that you were viewing is really all it could answer. Now it interrogates the data, and it can actually, instead of just answering your question, it can kind of be like, oh, let me show you. I'm going to apply the filters to your report and show you what you asked, and just directly apply filters and things to the report and do that. It sounds really cool. I haven't seen it work yet, but I'm interested in trying that one out. So that's pretty neat. Semantic model refresh templates. This allows you to refreshing data models or semantic models and even Power BI reports has been kind of problematic. You've got the method of doing the schedules, or you have to use the API, like in a pipeline, call the API to do a refresher report or refresh a semantic model. They've now got a way to just go in and basically set it up and say, hey, after this pipeline finishes, refresh this report and do contingencies and kind of DAG-like structures and things like that. So that's in preview right now and is rolling out. Excited about that one. There's a new Impala connector that is Cloudera is primarily, they use like Impala clusters. So if you're doing anything with Cloudera, that's a big deal. They're also they're using and implementing the new Arrow database connectivity as opposed to like the old ODBC type thing. And this is kind of I don't know. I found it to be pretty prevalent in a lot of things a lot of the updates and things that they're doing to integrate things like Snowflake and stuff like that, and just other things. But this is specifically to Hadoop and to big data types of things. So that's pretty exciting. More things that you can pull in. PostgreSQL now allows intra ID authentication, which is super cool. I use Postgre a lot for things like timescale DB to do time series type data and things like that. And previously, it's been kind of a pain to have to figure out how to do the authorization and stuff like that to just connect and do different things with that. So now it's fully integrated, or at least in preview, to be fully integrated, with intra IDs. And that kind of wraps up the major things for Power BI. Shifting over to Fabric now, there's a bunch of things that have that were in preview that are now generally available. And I'll just kind of call these out real quick. The Fabric Spark Management APIs are now GA, which is, I think Patrick LeBlanc talked a little bit about this on one of the YouTube things that he does. And but it basically allows, this is a mechanism that allows you to do monitor and look at your job series and things like that in Spark. The Spark Livey APIs are also GA, as well as the SQL Analytics API. The Livey in Spark, in the Spark world, is basically an API that lets you call and execute jobs remotely. And so that's now GA. And then the SQL Analytics endpoint allows you to basically sync up. This is kind of cool because you used to have to, even in my demo I did in July, I went through and have to go in and manually synchronize, make sure that the things you do in Lakehouse are kind of forced to quickly go and sync up everything so that you can view it and see the data, the new data and the new tables that you just created in ETL. If you want those to show up everywhere, like in the One Lake and everywhere else, then you have to do this manual sync. Well, now it's automatic. And so that's generally available now. And then there's also a save as feature for the Gen 2 data flows, which are like the Power Query, Gen flows, where you can do save as, and it saves like the XML or the JSON or whatever that is out, so you can kind of integrate it in with CI/CD a little bit easier, and without having to go through a bunch of gyrations of exporting it, shenanigans. You can just do a save as and make it available. So. A couple of other the new preview items for Fabric. Data agents, the preview of data agents, I think, has been out for a little bit, but now they support over 100 columns. So they support really wide tables. This is kind of fun. I played around a little bit with this, and you can, I took a table that had say around 20 million rows and maybe only about 70 columns. And one of those columns is like an embedded JSON, like a column with embedded JSON text in it. And I wanted to see how good Copilot could actually do that. And it needed a little guidance. And so my prompt up here is you can kind of see, oh, there we go. I was kind of coaching it along and treating it like a kid, no, do this and then try this, trying to get it to coax it to do what I wanted it to do. And so, but it does work. I think if I had to kind of set some things up a little bit better, it would have worked easier. I just kind of did it from scratch to see what it was capable of, and it did pretty good. It ended up, if you drill down, and I was asking it basically take a particular month and go in and look at these tags in this JSON column and parse those out, find ones that have a tag of a certain thing for a certain month, total all the costs, and tell me how much it was, right? Kind of a common, typical business question. And so, but you can drill down into that and it shows you the SQL. And so you can see the SQL it generated was actually spot on. It was a decent way to do it. It actually did a search on the tags to find a workload name and then have a particular one that I was telling it to look for. And then it totaled up and gave me back $3,200. So it works. It's kind of cool. I think it's obviously still a little bit in preview, but it's getting there and it's pretty promising. So next thing is Spark application comparisons. I'm not really sure what this is, but now it lets you do up to 4 side-by-side comparisons of Spark applications. I have no idea what that means. If anybody else, feel free to enlighten us, because I have no idea what that is. Let's see, Job Insights Diagnostic Library. They've added some new Spark, for those that don't know, is kind of built largely or mostly on, it's done in Java. So there's like jar files and stuff like that. So, so there's a new Java-based library that sits at the kind of the root of the Spark, the Spark cluster or the Spark P component there, and allows you direct access into a lot of the Spark logs and insights and stuff like that. And they're basically making more and more diagnostics information available, and that's in preview now as well. So there should be some good stuff coming out of that also. Other new features, this is kind of neat. There's you can now do copy into and open row set right in T-SQL. What this allows you to do is take your old familiar SQL statements and open a row set to, say, a JSON table or a CSV file, for example, pull that in and instantly query it, and then copy that, do a copy into and open that as a row set, copy it into and dump it into a table. So it's kind of a new way to do quick transforms or whatever and pull stuff out of a flat, or an unstructured file or whatever it is, and pop it into a structured table. Python notebooks can now also read and write directly to T-SQL. Did I say, yeah, I said Python notebooks. It's not PySpark, this is specifically Python. Previously, it was very problematic because it wasn't really integrated with authentication. You had to go through all these gyrations to make the connection and do all this stuff. Now it's all integrated, and they've introduced a new SQL magic, which is this little TSQL right here, the %% TSQL. And then there's these parameters, -- artifact, and then the name of the database that you're connecting to, the SQL database that you're connecting to. You type SQL database, and then you can just do your T-SQL right inside of a Python cell, and that's really all you got to do. Basically, the magic, the T-SQL magics take care of all the behind-the-scenes garbage that you would normally have to do about 2 or 3 cells to do authentication, do all this stuff. And so it's now all just bundled in there. So that's pretty cool and impressive because magics are not that easy to build sometimes. And then they've now introduced a nice new feature for customer managed keys. Instead of just doing it the way that it's embedded like in Fabric, you can now add a workspace level, you can now go and say, hey, this workspace for my managed keys, I want it to go point to a particular Azure Key Vault. And that's where I want you to get the keys. And it just handles all that for you. So it's much more secure. It's not storing a bunch of stuff somewhere that other people may have access to. It's all secured by the Key Vault. And it just passes that through to the Key Vault back and forth, kind of behind the scenes. So that's a cool thing. I'm interested in testing that one out. That's a big improvement. And then this one, Apache Iceberg support was actually in July. They introduced it, still in preview, just after our meeting in July. This came out. This is a big deal because this allows Apache. I don't know if everybody knows what this stuff is, but Iceberg is kind of like Delta. So Fabric uses Delta, and then it uses like the Parquet to do like the in-memory stuff. It's an in-memory, it's a columnar data store, right? Or data representation of those Delta files. Well, Apache is sort of a different concept. Or I should say Iceberg is a different concept than Delta. Kind of a different way to do the same thing, but there's a whole different technology stack that's built on this, one of which is Snowflake. So what we're seeing is integration with now, I think with Snowflake, and we're going to start probably seeing a lot of kind of collaboration and integration with Snowflake into the Fabric world, which is really exciting to me. Maybe we'll get DBT and some other cool things to go in with like Airflow and have DBT, Airflow orchestrated DBT conversions or something. I don't know, but there's a bunch of cool stuff that the Snowflake world and the Iceberg stuff does that's really, really good and really, I think, important to the previously non-Microsoft worlds, and bringing that in and integrating everything together, I think is pretty exciting. Next thing, which is neat, is the Azure Blob storage shortcuts. Cool thing about this is in Fabric, if you do a shortcut or you do a mirror, it is CU free, meaning that you do not get charged consumption on your fabric capacities. So that means that you can do a shortcut in Fabric to an Azure storage blob of files, and then you can basically read and write those essentially for no CU consumption. I think. Is that right? I'm looking at William. I'm like, I think that's right. So if that's true, yeah.
So I mean, any queries, you're going to see CU consumption there, just for the compute to make the query. But if the data lives in blob and you're using shortcuts to connect to it, there's no storage cost on the Fabric side. Instead, that storage is obviously in Azure Blob. So that's kind of how that works.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of fun. And then they've done some improvements to the centralized data governance in One Lake catalog. I haven't looked at this yet either, but it's kind of there's a bunch of just new aggregates and insight sensitivity labels and all that stuff. They're kind of pulling more things in from Purview and other things, I think, into kind of a centralized data governance right into the One Lake catalog. So that should help. I think a lot of there's just a lot of gaps there, I think, and I think that's a good thing. This one is super cool, and I'm excited to try this one out. It's called AutoML, new preview feature. It allows you to very easily inside of Fabric do some common and somewhat simpler machine learning types of algorithms and things right in Fabric, and there's a UI to it as well. Again, I haven't seen this and I haven't played with it at all, but conceptually, I don't know, and I don't know, William, if you know, but like I wonder, Alicia Frame is one of the key people on this team. She used to work for Neo4j, and they built something very, very similar for the graph data science playground, which was a kind of a way to do graph data science, machine learning types of things with an interactive playground where you just sort of configure and set up things and have it run, and then it automatically injects it into your data set, into your graph in this case. She used to work for them. She's been working for Microsoft now for a couple of years. She went from there to Google and then to Microsoft, and she's kind of one of the people on this team. And so this feels like very similar to like what they did with Neo4j. And so I'm really excited to try this out, but it basically allows like business analyst type people, finance people and things like that who aren't necessarily data scientists to be able to do machine learning and complex, highly parameterized, algorithms and things like that, where it automatically kind of figures out the best configuration from your data and stuff like that, and automatically does a bunch of things and allows you to inject that back into your data set to get rankings and all kinds of things like that. So that's a pretty neat feature. Next thing is GIS integration. You can now query and do things directly against the ArcGIS data right inside of PySpark. And so that's kind of a cool thing. And then Event Stream is integrating so that you can basically directly take live events and live streaming things and directly map them into structured data into a table or whatever. And so haven't played with that one yet, but that sounds kind of interesting for that kind of stuff as well. And then there's the last couple here, continuous ingestion from Azure Storage to the Event House. So they now let you, if you drop a new file somewhere in Azure Storage, it can now trigger an event and have Fabric pick it up and process it and do things with it. And this is kind of cool because it kind of integrates with the next thing, which is the CDC, the change data capture capacity, which is also in preview. This is it's sort of related, but not necessarily the exact same thing. In Data Factory currently, you have this where you point a pipeline and you turn on CDC and it detects the changes. If a new file gets dropped in or things like that, then it can automatically then just ingest the new stuff without re-ingesting everything. And this is important too in like things for like SAP. SAP uses CDC on these very large, huge tables and other ERP systems. So those two things together, I think are huge hugely needed and were kind of lacking before, and they're in preview this month now as well. And then the last thing I think on this is that Fabric is that multiple schedules can now be attached to a pipeline, which is kind of cool because you could run it differently on Saturdays or whatever. I think this was just sort of a gap that they didn't allow before, and so that's good news. And then Activator now can pass parameters to to Fabric items. I guess previously it couldn't, and now it can. So that did for the Fabric stuff. There's just 3 of these. And I know I told you there was a lot, so I'm trying to whip through them here. There's just 3 of these that I wanted to call out. Some really cool stuff happened in Excel. The first one is the new preview feature for the Copilot function. You just do equal Copilot, open paren, and you give it a command, and it kind of does stuff. I think Bill Gates or not Bill Gates, but Satya and a bunch of other people have thrown this on LinkedIn. But if you haven't checked it, I mean, it's kind of tough to check out, especially if you're on Enterprise, Enterprise M365, because you have to have somebody turn on or enable you to be able to opt into the beta program, the beta channel for that. I did post the thing on LinkedIn about how to do that for admins. But anyway, it's kind of cool. You can basically just kind of give it a command and a prompt, and then tell it where you want it to put stuff and what you want it to do, tie it to another cell for input, and then here they're just saying, hey, show me the airports in these countries, and then it gives you the airport codes. Here's another one where they take some stuff they have in Excel where it's just a bunch of feedback, and they say, okay, go and rank this feedback, categorize it as positive, what kind of sentiment is it? And it's just sort of I just pulled this off their blog website on this. So some really cool stuff there. And if you have an opportunity to check it out, I think it's one of those killer apps. And we're going to see all kind of cool uses for it. Pivot table auto refresh. This has been such a major pain in Excel for years. I'm so happy to see this, because now you don't have to manually refresh all your pivot tables every time you go make data changes or refresh something or whatever. So that's a huge thing. That's in preview. And then generally available now is this Power Query. I think, is that generally available or is that a preview? I labeled it as generally available. You might check me on that. I'm not 100% sure if that's GA or if this is a preview, but you can now, if you're using Power Query inside of Excel, you now, kind of like you do a Power BI refresh, you can now do an Excel refresh without having to open up that thing, hit the refresh, resave it. Now everybody can use it. So imagine you embed or even store an Excel file out on SharePoint, and people go look at it because it's got like monthly updates or whatever. They go and they open that thing up and it's got last month's data, unless the dude who made that or the person who made that, goes in and opens it, refreshes it, resaves it again so that everybody can see the new data. Now they don't have to do that anymore. It automatically will pop up and prompt you, hey, log in to see if you have permission to it, and it'll auto refresh it for you. If you don't have permission, it'll say, request permission, and then you can request permission, and then once you get permission, it auto refreshes it. So it's like a Power BI auto refresh for Excel now, which is super cool, I think. So anyway, with that, I think we're ready for Brent's presentation, and I will stop sharing, and Brent's going to talk about leveling up your Power BI data dictionary. So I will stop sharing and let you take it away, Brent. I'm out of breath. That was a lot.
Pour up your auctioneer voice.
I know.
These meetings more often just so those updates are short.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let me get my slide deck going here and we will get rolling. All right. Perfect. All right. So today, exciting topic for everybody, building a better data dictionary. So I know kind of documentation is a necessary evil. It's required. I don't love doing it, so I'm always looking for ways to automate or make my life easier when it comes to this. And there's been some exciting things that have come along in Power BI, and then we're going to take a look at Fabric at the end as well, on how you can make this a little easier for yourself. So let's see here. There we go. All right, so very quickly, a little about me. I'm originally from Pipestone, Minnesota, graduated from Minnesota State, Mankato, so go Mavericks here in Minnesota. I actually spent 20 years in the retail world in field leadership. So I'm a relative recent transplant to the data world. I was in field leadership. I was the guy who was building all sorts of dashboards, scorecards, that kind of stuff. So I kind of joke that I was data adjacent. I was always doing data things. It was just a small piece of my job. 2021, I decided I wanted to do that for a full-time job. So jumped to Fulton Analytics, started there May 2021, primarily working on back-end data engineering in the Microsoft Azure ecosystem. So lots of data integration work, lots of work in the Azure platform. And then ultimately, most of our stuff ends up in Power BI. So I've had the opportunity to kind of be end-to-end in that world. Since Fabric came out a couple of years ago, I've sort of led that charge internally at Fulton, trying to stay on top of everything. So all the blog posts and everything, that's kind of a regular stop for me. But I've tried to kind of evolve our solutions as we have worked through those. So when I'm not doing this stuff, you can find me helping my wife in the garden. So this time of year, we're doing lots of harvesting, lots of fun stuff out there, hanging out with my dogs. They need a lot of my time. Like to get out and hike every once in a while, and then I'm a big Lego fan too. So the whole adult fan of Lego, I'm one of those, but I blame my nephews for getting me back into it after a multi-year hiatus. So
Got your pre-order in for the Death Star yet?
I haven't pre-ordered it yet. Where do you put that thing? Like, it looks like it's like gigantic. I got enough big sets already.
Used car.
Okay, so a good data dictionary, it's, like I said, necessary evil, provides context and transparency for your end users. It helps build trust in your models and reports. So that's something that we work with a lot, is just how do we help that enablement? Starts with that trust. People need to understand that the data is what they think it is. We've really been working on having the data dictionary and the documentation live where the users need it to live. So, in the past, a lot of times, if you said, where's your data dictionary? It's like an Excel file on SharePoint, somewhere way over here. But a lot of times, especially with Power BI, as they're interacting with reports, they want that information at their fingertips. And ideally, if you can get it right on the same page, that's going to help with that trust and enablement. But it can also be onerous to build and maintain. So, I've been with Fulton for about 4 years, and we've had about 400 ways to do this. Everybody's tried to build a better mousetrap with it. And then sometimes they just wither away in obscurity. So I know with the Power BI tenants I can get to, if I jump in, a lot of them with data dictionaries might be, 6, 9, 12 months out of date, just because it's the last thing on a lot of folks' mind, on your day-to-day to go back and update your data dictionary. So what we're going to take a look at today, we're going to look at some of the new tools that have come out really over the past year or two, and see how they can help us build, enrich, and maintain our data dictionary with less of that overhead effort. So we're going to use the DAX info.view functions and DAX query view inside of Power BI. We're going to take a look at TMDL view again. So we dug into that last month. We're going to spend a little more time with it this month. GitHub Copilot. So looking at how can you automate some of these tasks? How can you offload some of that mental load and have GitHub help you out? And then finally, we're going to look at Fabric Notebooks and Semantic Link and how that can help you inside of your Power BI tenant. So from the model metadata standpoint, in the before times. So you can always get at this model metadata. It's been there, it's been under the hood, but it was a little tough to get to. A lot of times you had to use external tools. You had to, unpack that PBIX, get at the BIM file. Like, you could always get to this stuff, but those hoops kind of made it a challenge. Especially when you wanted to automate your solution, looking across your entire tenant, looking at multiple models and everything that's going on. There's a lot of things that you had to jump through to, use APIs or extract the data and clean it up and put it into some kind of format. External tools, like I mentioned, made it somewhat easier. So that definitely was a big help. And I got one shout out here to Mark. I'm not going to butcher his last name because I know I'll say it wrong. Data Mark, if you follow him on LinkedIn or anything, but his model documenter tool, that's been a go-to for us at Fulton. That's kind of the last step when we hand off a model, was run that documenter tool, kick that output out, just so that we've got a record of what the model was when we handed it over. And that you could pull some of this information out of as well. But again, it was kind of a static pull. You'd run the tool, you'd pull that data out, And then it just kind of sits there until somebody runs it again. But now with the DAX info functions, that's really what I'm using as the root of my solution today. There's more than one way to do it today. This is the one we're going to focus on, but the beautiful thing with Fabric is it gives you a lot of options. But the info functions came to Power BI. December 2023 is when the blog post was that announced them. So there's about 50 of them that are out there. If you go on dax.guide, or if you just search DAX info functions, it'll pull up the whole list of them. But if you're familiar with dynamic management views, a lot of what's there is going to look very familiar to you. It just gives you a ton of information about what's going on under the hood in your model. So using this, you could easily gather some of that information using DAX Query View. So that we've been able to do for a while. But there was one kind of gap with that, in that you couldn't put this into a calculated table. So you could do it in DAX Query View, you could export it from there, but you couldn't just sync it to a table quickly or easily. There was still kind of some things you had to jump around with. But you could combine with other DAX functions, so there was some cool stuff you could do. The info.view functions, on the other hand, they came out right about a year ago. So October 2024, came out in a blog post, I think just in the monthly summary. I don't know if they even got their own blog post, now that I think about it when I went back and looked for it. But yeah, so they've been around about a year. And they brought some more functionality because they can be used in calculated tables. So now you can take that and you can just create a DAX calculated table in your model and pull all that information together nice and quickly. So for the info.view functions, there's 4 key ones out there: info.view tables, columns, measures, and relationships. We're just going to look at the top 3 today. Relationships, I guess you could document it, but typically I'm just going to go look at the model view if I got to mess with that. And my end users don't really care about the relationships, as long as everything's working in the model. They care about the other stuff. So these you can just use as is. They return a ton of information. So let's go out here. All right, so I'm going to switch over to all right. So jumping into Power BI, this is DAX Query View. So if you haven't used DAX Query View, there's a ton you can do in here when you're diagnosing measures, when you're writing new measures. If you work with Copilot, it can help you generate new measures and troubleshoots and things. I haven't done a ton of that, to be honest with you. But in this case, we're just going to look at what some of the output looks like here. So if I just look at the info.columns, this is the one that's been around a little longer out there in the world, but you can see it returns here. So it's going through, giving me IDs, table IDs, names, kind of spells out a little bit of everything, data categories. Let's see here. Yeah, kind of the is unique. There's an is hidden somewhere in here. So lots of stuff, tons of information. This typed column tells you whether it's a calculated one or just a data column. But yeah, lots in here. If we look at one of the other ones, just go up here, look at tables. And again, same thing. So you can see it matches what's over here. This particular one, this is just a PBIX that I pulled out of some other content somewhere. I'm not even totally sure where I got this one, but it's got auto date time. So you can see those local date tables show up too. So this is a way that you can quickly spot if those exist out in your environment and get them killed. But yeah, ton of information in here. Lots of useful stuff that you can use, but there's also a lot in here that you don't necessarily care about or need. So jumping over to the info.view.columns over here on the next tab, easy, it's a little cleaner, neater view. So they dropped some of the IDs, some of those enumerated fields that were there. So like some of the column types and things like that, they've actually spelled out, in a more friendly way, what's going on over there. Let's see here. Yeah, so here's column type. Gives you some different information in terms of where it came from, what's going on. If there was, let's see here, somewhere in here, there's an expression. Yeah, expression. So if it's a DAX, if it's a calculated column, it's going to give you the DAX behind it here. So lots of good stuff in the mix. So now to put these into the model, the way that I typically do this is I just go over to, let's jump over here. Let's do modeling, and we are just going to do table. And I got it copy pasted because I don't like to type if I can avoid it. Okay, so for tables, So because I don't necessarily want everything that's returned by that, that's why I'm doing select columns here and just grabbing the ones that I care about. So I'm just grabbing what is the home table that it's in, what is the description. So if you filled out descriptions in your model, it can snag that. If not, we're going to take a look at how to populate those in a minute. It's pulling over that DAX formula and then whether it's hidden or not. So tables. This is pretty quick. It doesn't add a whole lot of overhead to your model. So if you're worried about model size or anything, you're really just grabbing metadata. Is over. There we go. All right. So now we've got living right inside our model. We've got these three that are right here. They're going to keep up to date. So whenever you refresh, as you're adding new measures, as you're adding tables, whatever you're doing to your model, it's going to continually keep these up to date. So now instead of having to manually translate this somewhere else, you've got it right here in your file. I typically just jump over to model view. Sorry, my page is huge. This one. I usually just create it as kind of like a mini model off to the side over here. So it doesn't need to connect back to anything else that's going on. There. And there we go. So now we've got this living in there, and now you can kind of pull it in wherever you want to. So you can pull this in as just a data dictionary page. Let's see, I've got my completed one, like a cooking demo over here, so you don't have to watch me create visuals. So a lot of times we work on a centralized model sort of format. So we have a centralized model in an environment or models, sometimes you have multiple and then thin reports connected to them. So a lot of times we'll create this as a page right inside of that model. So it lives there. You can create it as its own thin report. You can pull this into tooltips or info pop-ups on pages, wherever it needs to be. So an example of that, and again, this was kind of a quick and ugly one, but just dropped an info button up top up here. If we click on that one, it just pulls up a table just showing what the measures are on the page. So we've got our measure right there. Table it's coming from. The description is whatever you entered into that field. So if you go into model view and enter descriptions, you can pull that in. That's where we try to put the business friendly language. A lot of times we'll put in there if we have report requirements that came from the end users, we'll just take whatever language they had and just drop that right in there to help them kind of translate to the data that it's coming from. And then you can give them the DAX formula there as well if you'd like. So it kind of pulls it all together, makes it accessible to that user if they're on the page. They can click on that, quickly get to those definitions, see what's going on.
So that info button, you said it only shows measures on that page. How does it know which measures are?
I just filtered on the side. Yeah. Yeah, just did a visual level filter. You could probably get fancy and like set it up to dynamically look at what measures are there, but I didn't go that fancy with my demo. Yeah.
I have another quick question.
Yeah.
So this is like interesting so of course, a lot of times there's like 10,000 Power BI reports in an environment.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that you could almost do like, because you can, if these are published up to Power BI, you can then create a new report that just pulls in each of those reports as one big giant model. You can only do about 3 or 4, and then you can like do this over like a whole bunch of them at once.
We're gonna do that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to preempt you. I'm like,
You're stealing my thunder.
I'm sorry. I just went there.
No, but I mean, this sort of where this came up is that we were working on it was manufacturing operations, and they had a lot of really specific measures that they were digging into.
Yeah.
And just as they were migrating from one ERP to another. So they had big life change happening there at the same time that they were rolling out Power BI. So they're getting used to kind of 2 new tools and interfaces. So we were constantly battling questions about where did this data come from? What is this calculation? What's happening under the hood? So that was really what kind of spurred me to start looking into how can we automate and pull some of this stuff into the Power BI model a little easier. Just because then, like I said, they can just click the button, they train everybody, click the button. If it doesn't answer your questions, then reach out to us.
Yeah.
Cut down on the email volume also. Yep. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the quick solution. You know, in this one, I've got just a measure over here that's tracking how many of my measures don't have descriptions entered. So as you're going through and, you know, kind of doing just auditing or, you know, looking for specific things in your environment, if you wanted to, in another one of these I did, we actually used the text slicer, the new one, to look through the DAX expressions, looking specifically for some of the problem things like some of the filter and some of those functions that can cause performance issues. So again, I mean, there's pieces of this you can do in external tools, but this kind of brings it right to Power BI, right under the hood. So if you don't have external tools available, or for whatever reason, you know, you can't get to those, this kind of brings it all just under one roof, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the base solution there. Let me jump back over here. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, my modified DAX for the calculated tables just cleans up some of the column names, makes it easier to model them together and brings over the basics. So there's an example for my tables one, just pulling a couple things together. But you could grab from any of those, you know, 40, 50 columns that were in those function tables that are returned to customize for whatever purpose you're looking for. Here's the example of kind of the mini model that I put together there too. So yeah. Let's see, so we already looked at that. So now I mentioned descriptions, and you know, especially as you're looking ahead to prepping models for AI and getting ready to, you know, point an LLM at it or Copilot or anything else, the more information you can give it in here, the better off you're going to get from those tools. So that's been a big effort from us, is that we've got a lot of clients that are AI curious, but maybe haven't quite, you know, rolled out any solutions yet, but we've been looking at what can we do up front to just make sure that when they get to the point that they want to start using Copilot or, you know, other external LLMs, whatever it may be, how can we have it ready to go for them? So to enrich them, that's where we can jump in and look at those descriptions specifically. And this is where I've really kind of latched on to that TMDL view and the ability to interact with your model as code. So tabular model, definition, language. I always forget what it is, so I like to spell it out like this. Amazing how with that acronym I can come up with all sorts of stuff when I don't have it right in front of me. But again, lets you interact with your model as code right inside Power BI Desktop. So TMDL view, it's, I believe, still preview. I don't think it's gone GA technically.
It did just,
Yeah. Yours?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was
so
one of
there's
my
some
announcements.
updates.
Yep.
Okay.
Just recently.
Okay, so never mind. It's now GA. So feel free, dive in and take a look. Once you have it enabled before, now if it's GA, I imagine it'll start just showing up automatically, but it's over in the left navigation bar right below where DAX query view was. And the best way to learn it is to just jump in and use it, but I put the caution on there just because you, and I know Bryant mentioned last month too, that if you, as you're adding, deleting, removing, changing things in there, that is going to impact your model directly. So, you know, you've got that kind of safety button of apply that you can kind of avoid, but you just want to make sure you don't have any, like, you know, cat walking on the keyboard as you're in that view or anything to mess up something that's going on with your model. So be careful there. If you want to learn more about TMDL view, Tabular Editor has put together some pretty spectacular free training courses that are out there. So they've got a whole course dedicated to TMDL view. Microsoft Learn, of course, has some great tutorials and things that are out there. Out in the community, Matthias Tierbach, is how you say his name? I'm terrible. I butcher names all the time, but I think he's sort of one of them that helped create the standards around the TMDL language. So he's a good one to follow that's out there. Rui Romano has done a ton with the developer tools and kind of helped get TMDL into all the different pieces it needs to be in. John Kursky's got some great content out there, some good blogs. And then Jason Romans, I was actually just on, I think it was the DC Power BI user group. He did a whole presentation on just getting to know TMDL like a week ago. So you can check him out too. It's out on YouTube. Okay, so let's go back over to file. Let's look at TMDL. So over here on the left, we've got our TMDL view. And to jump in here and take a look, you know, as I mentioned, just giving it a try is super easy. We're just going to grab our sales right up here. So it's our sales table, but pretty much everything's been hidden except for the measures. This one. We're just going to go ahead, drop that in. And what it does there is it goes ahead and it scripts out essentially everything that describes this object in your model. So starting at the top up here, you can see that create or replace statement. That's where you got to be careful because it's going to replace whatever's in your sales table as we edit and make changes here. But then as it goes through, you can see it's first got all my measures up here. So it's got regular sales dollars, and then it's got your DAX, right here that's in there. So this also makes it really easy if you need to copy paste measures from one model to another. You can snag them right from here, and you can jump over if the same table exists in a different model. You can copy paste between, pull stuff back and forth. So it makes it nice and easy, but you can see you've got everything in here from the formatting strings. I don't think I have any measures hidden, but if I get down a little further, get measures. Down here into columns, you can see it gives us our data types. It's got that is hidden flag. So if it is hidden, you'll get a true. Show you what's going on there. So this is where you can start to see some of the possibilities when it comes to just bulk edit your model. If you need to make a lot of changes. If you want to enter descriptions into here, you just enter them as code comment. So you just go up here. In this case, it's got to go above the measure, but comments in TMDL are just called out with that triple slash. And then we can just do our sales. And so whatever we enter here, if I apply this one back, now if we were to jump over here, sales, let's see, what was that one? Your sales dollars. And there's the description that I just entered in. So the nice thing about it is that if you've ever entered descriptions via the box right here in the UI, every time you enter and then tab out of it or click out of it, it kind of spins its wheels and does the whole working on it thing. So if you're in a big model, that can really kill a lot of your time. If you're over in TMDL view, you can go through and you can enter all your comments and all these at once and then just apply them back to the model once. So you've already saved yourself, I don't know how many clicks. Lots of clicks compared to what's going on out there. So pretty powerful. Like I said, the best way to get in there is to, on a lot of these, you can make changes in the UI and then script it out in TMDL, and you can usually spot where the different attributes show up. So that's how I've learned most of this, is just by kind of poking at it and seeing what's going on. So, all right. So jumping back over here, let's see. Okay, so I got one more quick slide, and then we're going to jump into Copilot. Okay, so to make this even faster, you could definitely go through and do it manually. There's always going to need to be some kind of manual effort to fill in the context, fill in the business descriptions. Like I said, if you have a requirements document, you might have to grab some stuff from there. But if you're jumping into a model, and I did it for one of these, I had a model that had about 500 measures in it, and I didn't want to sit and do all these, right from scratch. So that's where I explored GitHub Copilot. This is where I've had the best luck. It's the one that seems to understand TMDL closest out of the box. You still have to, to Bryant's point, you've got to kind of direct it, give it some guidance from time to time, because yeah, it'll do some interesting stuff, and we'll do it live here in a minute, so you'll see what some of that is. But you can copy paste that TMDL script over into, I'm going to use VS Code to show this off. For GitHub, you can get a free account for that one. There are some limits to it, but in the messing around I've done with it, I've never used it all day, every day. But for a couple of tasks a day, I don't think I've ever hit the limit or gotten throttled or anything. So for sure, check it out. You can get it linked up with your GitHub account, nice and easy. So the prerequisites that you need to do the way I'm going to do it here: VS Code, free download, GitHub Copilot extension. Sign up with that free account. And then there's a TMDL extension that exists out there as well. So you need all those to make it happen. Let's.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you're showing this in GitHub. For those of us that use Azure DevOps, is there kind of an equivalent or anything like that on that side?
Ooh, I don't think there's a Copilot in DevOps.
There is not. So the Copilot capability is specifically GitHub Copilot, but you can use GitHub Copilot and still publish repositories and stuff back to Azure DevOps. So getting the Copilot capabilities, which is the large language model that will help you code, does not require that you publish that repo back into GitHub. So it's really just the Copilot is available through GitHub and through that that identity and that login. But your project, so he could hook up this project in VS Code to an Azure DevOps repo and be doing check-in, check-outs in Azure DevOps, but use GitHub Copilot for code assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
link all your tools together. Okay, so VS Code, if you don't have VS Code, it's fantastic. I use it for anything and everything. Like I feel like this has become one of my go-tos with the extensions that are out there. So the GitHub Copilot is a quick one to download, not any heavy installation instructions or anything. And then the TMDL extension, if you just search TMDL, the top one here that's certified by Microsoft, that's the one that I've got installed. So, and then some other, there's Power BI Studio and stuff, but we're not going to dig into those today. But all right, so let me grab over here. Actually going to delete my comment out. Okay, so then we're just going to do Control A, remove everything. Paste. All right, so there we go. You can see we got our IntelliSense, we got our colors, we got all that good stuff happening over here. So now what we can do is I've got GitHub Copilot over here operating in, it's just in ask mode right now. I think I had to switch it to agent mode to get my content. And then I'm using just GPT-4.1 is what I've been testing this with. I've seen buzz online that GPT-5 might even be a little better at figuring out what's going on with this. I haven't gone down that road quite yet myself.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
GPT-5 is so much better than
Yeah.
4.0. Yeah, at just code completion and code assistance in general. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay.
I agree.
There's obviously the advertising, like marketing stuff, and they're like comparing it to Claude 4 and all of that fun stuff. But in practice, I've used GPT-5 for, building out applications with GitHub Copilot compared to what I was doing like a month ago with 4.0. It's so much smarter.
Yeah.
Looks like I must need to enable something in order to make
And actually, it was even better than Claude Sonnet for me.
I've been using Claude
It
for,
was really good.
I have same experience,
Yeah.
yeah. Sonnet, I used to use, I didn't like the 4.0 in there at all. I always used Sonnet, Cloud Sonnet 4.
Yeah.
And then both the 5 mini one and the full-blown one are both excellent. They're really good.
Now, they do burn through, like if you're doing GitHub Copilot, they burn through your like premium, whatever, tokens and things like that. But again, like you said, if you're only doing this a few times a day, you're not gonna,
Yeah.
you won't burn through everything in a
And
month.
mini doesn't, mini is 0.
Yeah, mini's free.
honestly, even that model I did that was 500 some measures, I think I did descriptions for all of them without hitting a limit. So yeah, none of the tables were gigantic, I would say, but I mean, that's a lot of measures to classify. So all right, so starting out, I just asked it, do you know the Power BI TMDL standards? And it says, yeah, I know them. I know what's going on. It gives you some information about it. So we'll see how it does here. This is where your mileage may vary sometimes. So I'm going to say, please add descriptions to measures. Okay, so I'm saying, please add descriptions to the measures in the open file using language a typical business user would understand. So I don't want it to get technical. We're just going to ask it to keep it neat and clean. So you'll see here, it's going to start to work. It's going to start thinking through. And it's already telling me it's going to do the wrong thing. Okay, so you can see in the little mini viewer there, it's scrolling through the entire file. It's going through and it's applying them as an annotation, which great, but that's not what the TMDL standard likes. It always pops up to save your file too after it does that. So, okay, so now that it's gone through and completed, if you've used any kind of Git tools or anything, DevOps, GitHub, any of those, and looked at code diffs before, you know what this looks like, where it's showing you what it added to the file. So it's got everything highlighted in green. At the bottom down there, it gives me either the keep or undo. And so in this case, you know, the descriptions look fine, they look great, but If I copy paste this back over to my TMDL in Power BI Desktop, it's not going to know what to do with them because it put it in this annotation tag. So I'm going to say now, okay, so I'm telling it they need to be above the measure name using the comment syntax. So let me hit undo on that one. And let's give this one a go. Very polite. It thanked me for clarifying my instructions. How to treat the machine overlords well.
It is, one thing I've noticed, it is less obsequious though. Well,
Yeah.
GPT 4.1 is still pretty annoying, but GPT 5 is like a little bit more matter of fact.
Okay.
Which is nice.
Okay, so again, it went through. Here, pop up. All right, so now we've got it in the format that we know looks right. So this is where you probably need to play around with TMDL a little bit ahead of time, just to know what these need to look like structure-wise, so you can kind of call it on its mistakes and give it that corrective guidance. I know I've used it to create just basic measures before, like I've given it tables and just said, you know, using the basic aggregations, just go through and create me a set of measures for this table for everything numeric, for some of those kinds of things. It's pretty good at doing those. It's just calling out when it makes the syntax errors and just getting it all corrected before you take it back over. So in this case, looks pretty good. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to keep this one. And I'm going to do. Okay, so we copied the whole thing, go back over here. And we're going to paste it in there. And so this is where have your file backed up. Because if you make a mistake, if you didn't copy all your text, whatever you might have done, this is going to change your model to what we copied back into there. So hopefully you got some kind of version control scheme that you're using. But now we're just going to go ahead and hit apply. And boom, there we go. It's pretty quick to add these descriptions and everything. So now if we jump back into our model view, and if we start going through our sales table here, so now everything, those descriptions we just generated are all populated over here. So nice, easy way to do it. Save yourself a lot of time, especially for some of the just basic aggregation measures and things like that that aren't very complicated. This is a nice way to just get it in that business language, get the bulk of the work done, and then you can go back through and just build in, you know, those specific requirements or whatever specific context you have for your end users. So you can fit a lot of text in this description box as well. I don't feel like I've hit a limit yet, but I don't think I've tried to put in anything too dramatic, but we have pulled in a lot of just from those requirements documents and everything. So whatever language the business user gave to us, we're kind of giving it back to them and then showing them what we did to meet that requirement. So it's a nice way to have it living where your users can use it. So
Have you tried doing anything with the synonyms at all?
not yet. That's
Okay.
next on my list.
That would be, yeah, it would be cool.
Because I don't think these pop up in the TMDL view.
No, but they're important for Copilot on when you're interrogating,
Yeah.
when you're asking it questions about your report or data. So,
On my to-do list.
yeah, that's a good one. Also, just real quick, since I already interrupted you, I put in the chat a link to how to put custom instructions in VS Code. That works for Visual Studio 2022 as well, but how to do custom instructions for Copilot so it can better understand your TMDL or whatever you happen to be doing, how to configure and set that up so that Copilot is a better Copilot.
As I was testing this, like when I put in the measure using the correct syntax and then gave it to
Yeah.
Copilot, like
Yeah.
if you just tell it, hey, use my example and add for the rest of these,
Yeah.
then it'll figure it out right away.
Yeah.
So I mean, like all the GPT tools and everything, the more context you give them, the better output you're gonna get.
Yeah, and so you can set these context files up and then it'll just auto read them and then use them, which is helpful. So you can vibe code it then.
All right, perfect. So that's kind of, if you're working within one model, you know, that's a lot of information to really sort of arm you with to go out there and make that work. But kind of like Bryant mentioned before, if you're out in Fabric, or even if you just have a larger Power BI tenant, you probably have a lot of stuff going on out there. So you probably have multiple models, you probably got a lot of reports out there, a ton of that metadata that exists where this would be handy. So, so far we've just been looking internal to one semantic model with different pieces that we've used. But if you want to capture everything from your multiple models in a tenant, that's where we're going to go take a look at Semantic Link. And this is one, I think I heard some chatter in the room about this before we started, but if you're in Fabric and not in Semantic Link, I would say put that on your learning list, because you can really do all sorts of, I barely scratch the surface with it. The more I look at it, the more I find, and there's still pretty regular updates with Semantic Link Labs and some of the other things that are out there. So check it out. Very basically, so this is very high level. I've actually got a whole 1 hour session just on Semantic Link and Link Labs. So there's a lot more we could go into. But it's built on the SempI Python library, which is a library that was built specifically to interact with things inside of Fabric. So this is something relatively new. I think it came out right after Fabric was announced, like that summer or something, or maybe that fall, right after Fabric came out in 23. But they've added everything in the kitchen sink to it since then. So again, built to work inside Fabric, interact with your items and environment. And then there's an extension to it called Semantic Link Labs, which we're not going to dig into that today, but if you need to do anything from an admin standpoint, or if you're migrating anything in your workspace, or you need to do translations, check out that library, because there's probably something that's going to save you some time and effort in there. So if you're an admin, check it out. You interact with it using Fabric notebooks. To learn more, I listed these two guys, but they're not the only ones. But Michael Kowalski has kind of been the point person on Semantic Link Labs. He's the one who tends to push all the updates. So if you follow him on LinkedIn, you'll see as those come out. I feel like they were weekly for a while, which thankfully he slowed down so some of us can catch up. Now, I think he said they're monthly now that he does an update. Yeah. But a ton of great stuff out there. And then Sandy Pawar, who I think he's internal to Microsoft now.
Yes.
Is he? Okay, yeah. He used to work for Hitachi, I think, for a while. Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Recently moved.
Okay. Yeah, he's super smart guy. His blog that he's got out there, he's got a ton of notebooks where he's doing incredible stuff. So check it out. I learn a lot just, seeing how they approach things. There's lots of stuff I pulled there in terms of how to interact with things. So, okay, we're going to jump out of the slides and we're going to jump over to Fabric. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I kept mine fairly simple in that I'm using the same methodology that I did for one model to do it across the whole tenant. It's by no means the only way to do it. There's some other ways that you can get at this information using Semantic Link Labs. Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring is another kind of accelerator tool that's out there. Mike and I were digging into that this weekend. There's a ton of information that gets pulled into Lakehouses there that you could pull out and do some of this same kind of work. So, definitely poke around at some of these solutions. No need to recreate the wheel, but I'm doing mine via a notebook. So we'll just jump in. We'll walk through quickly what's going on here.
UIOD, bring your own data.
All right. So again, high level, we won't go through every line of code that's in here, but first box up here, what I'm doing is I'm just pulling in that Semantic Link package and some other dependencies. So go ahead and give that one a run, get my session going here. What we're going to do next is we're going to go out and get a list of workspaces from across the tenant. So in this case, what I'm doing is I only want the ones that are on my Fabric capacity. So some of the functions that I'm calling will only work if you have a capacity tied to the workspace. If you're still on a lot of pro workspaces, you can get around that by just temporarily assign it to your capacity, run this, move it back to pro. There's a lot of things you can do to work with that, but I'm just going to look for only the ones that are on my capacity, and then I'm just going to dump them into a list that I'm going to use to iterate over in a little bit here. So in my case, we only have a couple of workspaces that are tied to Fabric. A couple of them are tied to the monitoring and some other things. So we're going to handle that down here. So now what I'm doing is I'm going through and looking through my workspaces to see which ones have models in them. Because if it goes to a workspace that doesn't have a model, it's going to throw an error. So a lot of this is just kind of error handling as I ran into stuff, cleaning up some of those things. Okay, so now we get on here and it's saying the FabFun AI has no models in it. That just has some notebooks that we've been doing, some kind of AI work with it. And then the FUAM capacity metrics, so that's the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring. There's models in there, but it's everything attached to lakehouses and things that don't have tables that we can read and interact with. They're kind of locked down. So after it went through, did my checks, removed that one for FUAM. It just left me with these two that have models in them that users have developed that we want to go through and audit. Okay, so now this one down here, I'll start it running and then we'll kind of talk through what it's doing. So I'm just initializing 3 empty data frames right at the top. So if you've worked with Pandas, PySpark, any of those, data frame will be familiar with you. But I'm initializing my empty data frames and then it's going through that populated workspace list, setting the workspace, going to grab the models again, and then it's doing a couple of things. So first off, for the models, I'm looping through and looking for any model that doesn't have any tables in it. So like the default semantic models, if you haven't noticed, they're going away and the tables disappeared. I actually created a lakehouse yesterday and there was no semantic model attached to it. So hooray, that'll clean up the environments quite a bit. But that would throw an error in the past. So that's all I'm doing here is just looking to see if there's tables in them. And then the next one here, this is where it'll look familiar. So that same DAX that I'm using over in my individual models, I'm just pulling that in here. So again, I did that just so that my solution is similar between the individual model versus the tenant-wide one that I'm doing here. There are semantic link functions you could call to do similar, like you could just do fabric.list tables and call in a model, list columns, list measures. So there's other ways you can extract that information if you so choose. But this one, I chose to keep it simple. I've got some print statements so I can kind of see as it's going through, evaluating all of the different ones that are out there, telling me if they're empty, you know, what's going on. So a lot of stuff. And then down here, let's see, I think it was done, wasn't it? Yep. Took about a minute. Here I'm just setting it so that my data frames show all the rows. And so then down here, before we run these, here's where we can take a look at those data frames and just make sure we captured what we intended to. So here it's going through, it's got my model name over here on the right, and then it's got the different tables and everything that are in there. The information I asked it to grab for measures, we could do something. You can kind of go through and just make sure that your data looks like it needs to. I use this to make sure I wasn't duplicating anything up. You know, anytime you start looping stuff in Python, I always trip over something somewhere along the way. But you can kind of see what's going on. Let's see, so if I had these, and now here what I'm doing, if you've done any writing back to lakehouses, there's some things that Fabric doesn't like white space in your column names. So you gotta strip those out of there. And in this case, the returned data frames that I have brackets on the column names, and I don't want those in there either. So I'm just stripping those out with this step here. And then after I do that, final step in here is all I'm doing is just writing these back to my attached lakehouse. So you do have to attach a lakehouse to it before you start. All it's going to do is go through here, converts it into a Spark data frame, and then just writes it back using overwrite. So I'm going to correct it each time. If you wanted to, you could do an append mode and you could actually keep a record of how things change. So if you wanted to see, you know, who changed this measure, who broke this, you could build in some of that if you wanted to. I'm just overwriting them each time, so. That go, should be pretty quick.
Are you making this notebook available to the group?
I will put it out there on my GitHub. It's not out there yet, but it will be before SQL Saturday coming up in a couple weeks. So if you connect me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to share it to anybody who wants to take a look at it ahead of then. So if I get really fancy, I might try to build one that'll automatically deploy the lakehouse and everything, but that's where I gotta spend a little more time with it. Okay, so now we've got our tables over here, just in my default schema. So I got columns, measures, tables. So again, it's going to look very similar to what I did inside of an individual model, but now it went through and it grabbed from across the whole tenant. So mine's automatically going out and grabbing everything that I have access to. If you wanted to, where I designated those lists up above, instead of letting it sort of assemble the list, you could always just specify and just say, hey, I only care about these workspaces. I only care about these models. So there's some places where you can kind of control what you're putting into that. So if you just have production workspaces you want to capture, great. If you want to hoover up everything to be able to evaluate, you can do that too. So, all right, jump back to
One quick question, the person who is running, right, should have access to those
Correct.
workspaces, right? Otherwise,
Yep.
won't get it.
Yeah, so mine is set up, this one for my demo, it's just using my credentials.
So
And I'm
last
the
time when I ran it,
admin.
right, if you don't have access, it won't pull up anything.
Exactly. So it's, if another user, like somebody who just had like a member or something to these workspaces, or if they weren't in a workspace, it wouldn't be returned for them. So that is important to know if you're the one running it. To more productionalize this, I'd probably do like a workspace identity or something, and tie the notebook to that one instead, just so it's not tied to me as the user. But yep, that's great to call out. Okay, so out here, this model metadata, this is my lakehouse that it fed everything into. And then I just created a semantic model from that one. So it's going to look exactly like the one that we did over in. Same thing. So just the three, pretty simple, nothing too complex going on over here. And then if we look at, I made just a very quick report. It's not my prettiest work. But again, so now similar thing. So now instead of it being specific to a single model, now we're looking at our entire tenant, everything that we wanted to feed into there. So we could do the same thing. I've got that same measure that's going out and looking for which ones don't have descriptions entered. So it's just looking for if that's blank, counting those back. But we can choose a specific one. So like, I know this is from our fantasy football report that we put together. But that one, I know we've got a ton of measures that are out there. So we got 38 measures that don't have descriptions in that model. So if you're looking for things to audit that you want to go back and clean up, this is a nice way to just get that quick picture of what's happening out there. So yeah, pretty snappy. And so then again, like I said, now that this one out here, so this notebook, you can schedule via pipeline. You can just drop it in and schedule it to run, once a week if you wanted to. In theory, you could just put it into a deployment pipeline and just say, after my deployment pipeline, go out and fire this notebook off. But it's going to keep everything up to date without you having to go in and just manually touch this stuff all the time. So that's my goal, automate my documentation so I don't have to mess with it. So yeah, so I guess any questions? At the end of the demo. So yeah, I'll get the resources out there on my GitHub shortly. I'm going to probably make a couple tweaks to it as we go through the next week or so. But ahead of SQL Saturday, I'll put it out there because I'll be presenting this session and lots of other stuff at SQL Saturday.
So you kind of mentioned lake houses. So if you have a data model that's using direct lake, you'd be hitting the lake house. And so I don't even know, are we able to do descriptions and synonyms in lake houses, like tables and columns in there?
In the lakehouse, no, but the semantic model.
Even though so even though the semantic model's on top of it's direct lake.
Yeah, I think you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, I'm almost positive you can. I think when I tested it though, if you have a true direct lake model, it gets mad about your formatted DAX. So when I tried to add the calculated tables to it, I had to strip out all the formatting and the indenting and just put it on one ugly line. And then it was happy with it. It was throwing errors if I had the formatting. So that's something to be aware of. We don't have a lot of true direct lake models that we're working with yet. So that's where.
And I think I'm not really used it, but I think even I think there's in the Delta Parquet, like in a table, like a native table, there's actually a description or a comments field that's available, like in SQL Server you don't have that, but like in a Delta Parquet table in Spark, you actually got a thing you can populate as well. Never really used it, but to answer the direct question of the semantic model, it doesn't matter where the semantic model is over the one lake, regardless of whether it's warehouse, lakehouse, SQL, or whatever. So the semantic model you're basically in Power BI, so it doesn't matter. It's like all the descriptors, measures, everything, comments, descriptions, all that stuff are all in there.
Yeah, this one's a direct lake model here, which I didn't do the descriptions on this one, but I know I have another direct lake model that I did go in and I was able to connect from desktop and script it in TMDL. I don't think you can get the TMDL view in the service view yet.
Not
Anybody know? Anybody?
yet. I think I can't remember if I read something about that or not. Yeah.
Yeah. DAX query view showed up out here, so I imagine it's only a matter of time before TMDL view is available out here.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now, if you connect from desktop and do the edit for the direct lake model, you can script in TMDL that way. So. Perfect. All right. So just a couple quick wrap up things. Like I said, I'll put the resources out there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already. Got my QR code there. So should activate it here. I've mentioned a couple times SQL Saturday coming up. I'll be speaking on Saturday, doing a slight twist on this session, so you can come check it out. Maybe go to another session during mine since you already saw it. But there's also going to be some pre-cons running on Friday, September 26th. So this year, there's 3 of them that are running. There's going to be an Intro to Fabric one that's led by Belinda Allen and Stacy Rudoy from locally here in the Twin Cities. So if you're new to Fabric, check that one out. Myself and Mike in the room here, we're actually doing another pre-con that's going to dig into some more advanced Fabric topics. So we're going to do some semantic link. We're going to do some working with your data in one lake. A lot about monitoring and governance. We're going to dig into a lot of that fun stuff. So if you want to spend a day hanging out with us, digging into some of those topics, check those out. They're all day Friday, September 26th, ahead of the event. So, and that's all I got. So I'll pass it back to Bryant to wrap it up.
All right. So yeah, thanks. Awesome. That was really interesting. All right, so next on the agenda, the last bit here, we're going to go through questions, suggestions, feedback, and that kind of stuff. So immediately following this meeting, we're opening it up for people to go over to Wooden Hill Brewing in Edina, which is, we're here, and so it's what, I don't know, not very far, but it's just kind of across. Kind of down the road a bit and was it 12 minutes it says or something like that? 8 minutes? Yeah, but it's
Too long to
walk. You definitely want to drive for sure. Yeah. And I think, yeah, so that's just if you want to just hang out and kind of do social hour, get some snacks, whatever you guys want to do there. That's after that. We don't have this posted yet, I don't think, but we are planning to do another meeting in November. As probably the last one of the year, and because we do every other month or 2 months. So the QR code there just goes to our main website, which we'll be making the announcement at once we get that all set up. And let's see. Oh yeah, M365 Twin Cities is still coming up on September 19th from 8 to 5. It's at Hennepin Technical College in Brooklyn Park. QR code there to tell you about that one or to link to that one if anybody's interested. And then I won't cover this again because Brent just did, but this again, 27th, and then the pre-cons on the 26th there, featuring yours truly there, Brent. So, and then if you do have questions, feedback, or suggestions, or if you do want to speak or have a topic, or give any kind of feedback at all, please consider, speaking or presenting if you want. Like William said earlier, it can be, 15 minutes to 45 minutes, whatever you guys want to do, anything in between. So, we can just stagger 2 or 3 15-minute deals or whatever. So it's comfortable for everybody, whatever you're willing to do. So, I guess, yeah, again, 90 minutes, up to 90 minutes, up to an hour and a half. So, but anyway, and that's a QR code there to give us feedback, take a survey and let us know. And lastly, you can join our group on LinkedIn. It's a really cryptic URL because it's 3800858 as our group. I don't know, we can rename that or whatever, but at any rate, on YouTube, it's MS for Microsoft BI User Group MN. On YouTube, and those are the QR codes for both of those to connect and link to that directly. Yeah, let us know and feel free to connect with any of us online and always happy to, have conversations and point people in the right direction or that kind of thing. So anyway, with that, I think that is it. We're ready for a happy hour, I guess. So, yeah.